Well, hello. We're back.
We're back.
We're back. So, welcome to Quarantiki number 18 from Lovecraft Cocktails. So,
Yeah.
it's it's legal,
Yeah.
legal to vote,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Legal
It
to
can
vote.
it can be drafted,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, yay, I
I
guess.
can drink. Yay.
Yeah. So she can drink. She couldn't drink last week, and I could only drink a little last week. And this week I'm going to have to be a little careful about it as well. But, that's us.
But your leg is recovering.
My leg is
My
recovering.
scars are all recovering.
Yay. So, there you go. There's too much information about us.
Yeah.
But today is a special day in Tiki fanatics' lives, or maybe just drinkers' lives. Today is a special day because, well, at least if you're in the U.S., because today is National Rum Day. Woohoo! What is this, August 16th? Yep.
Yeah.
So, National Rum Day. Yay!
We have comments.
So, Jen.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, glad to see you.
How's Bruno?
How's Bruno?
Yeah.
So, normally we would get together and we would make like 3 different tiki cocktails and that sort of thing. What we're going to do today is something a little different. Kind of a suggestion from one or actually a couple of people that watch these videos. And that's to do some rum tastings and talk about rum and rum classifications and how rums differ from one another a little bit. Today's been a little bit of a lethargic day around the Pooch household, so maybe my homework isn't entirely up to snuff on this one, so bear with me. We'll do this as best we can. But fortunately, I've got some good references working with me, so hopefully we'll get this down and you'll get a glimpse into the world that is rum, and we'll have a chance to appreciate some of those.
Yeah.
So
Jen pointed out to me earlier, I think yesterday, that Tiki Oasis is virtual this year.
Right, Tiki Oasis.
I think the largest Tiki convention.
The largest Tiki convention, at least in the United States, and
Right.
that probably makes it in the world. And it's currently going on virtually out of San Diego. I guess San Diego usually hosts it.
Yeah.
And we tuned in for a little bit of their live broadcast last night, and got to see a little bit of mostly history of Tiki Oasis. And we've never been to a Tiki convention. We would like to at some point, and who knows, maybe we'll jump in the deep end and go to Tiki Oasis at some point.
But one of the things they have is they have the Kaftan or the Mumu parade of
Right.
all the different Kafgans. And so I am wearing my
Kaftan.
Kaftan today. So
Which is
I can pretend like I'm
collar here.
my collar's messed up. Yes.
Yeah, so there we go. There we go.
So I can.
She has an animal print caftan.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
So
I can pretend
it's
like
my
I'm-
wild animal wife here. Yeah, that was kind of fun, and got to
Yeah.
see some of the
musical acts.
musical acts and some of the themes that they've had running through it. So while it is all centered around Tiki, it is also centered a little bit around mid-century America, and so you'll see things like the rockabilly kind of movement, and they did, what was it, 2016 was like the International Man of in Mystery,
Right.
and they did monster movies from the 1950s and 60s, the classic monsters like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Tentacles Everywhere, and that sort of thing. So each year has some sort of sub-theme to it, which is kind of interesting. So I have no idea what next year is going to be. This year was supposed to be, I guess, their 20th.
They're doing that next year.
And so they're going to make next year their 20th anniversary because they're not really doing a live one this year. So that's that. So that is what we've been doing tiki-wise. Been looking forward to actually National Rum Day and being able to actually taste some rums and get into this, share a little knowledge here. So full disclosure, my rum knowledge comes from a lot of different places. I cut my teeth with Martin Cate's book, Smugglers Cove. Heartily recommend this book. Very nice history of rum, different types and classifications of rum, history of tiki, particularly tiki in the United States, helpful hints on creating your own syrups and how to run a party, how to put together punches, all sorts of, just a really, really packed book. I will also recommend Minimalist Tiki by Matt Petrick. And Matt has his own breakdown of different types of rum and how he wants to classify them. There's also this book, The Curious Bartender's Rum Revolution by Tristan Stephenson, for Stephenson. And this takes you on a journey around the Caribbean and South America on a state by state and estate by estate distilling just tour of rum. When usually has like 2 or 3 sentences about the most popular rums from that particular distillery. So this is also a sort of a very nice little handy reference guide as to different rums. But, you know, rum is rum, right? I mean, rum is that stuff you put in with a Coke while you're at the frat house party, and that's what rum is. Well, hold on, not so fast. Now, if you go to most of your liquor stores around the U.S., you will find the rum generally divided into clear, white, silver, blanco rums, gold rums, and dark rums. And I'm here to tell you that differentiation pretty much doesn't mean a darn thing, other than whether or not potentially the rum has been filtered. Now, almost all of your clear rums, your silver rums, actually have some amount of aging on them, whether that's just a few weeks or upwards of 3 years. But the way they get that crystal clearness about them is by filtering. And the true crystal clears you'll see are largely coming from charcoal filtering. And you get examples of that from places like Bacardi. And here is a bottle of their Superior rum. Bacardi, you see that, you can almost see directly through that. The warping here is all because of the glass. It's just a crystal clear, but it's been aged like, I think it's 3 years. So you're like, wow, 3 years in wood. Shouldn't that be showing some signs of color? Well, it should, except that they strip out all of that color. All right, so what else could possibly happen to your silver rum? Well, your Bacardi's rum comes primarily from their distillery in Puerto Rico and is all column stilled. And but here is a different white rum. This is Plantation's 3 stars. The 3 has nothing to do with how old it is. The 3 has to do with the fact that this is a blend of rums from Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad, which Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad do different things with their rums and distill them in different ways. So this gets a very interesting flavor profile for this, even though it's just a clear rum, a Blanco rum. So very, very different. Also up on the possibilities are things like this. This is Clement's French Caribbean Rum. It is a rum, R-H-U-M Blanc. It's a rum agricole, crystal clear on this. Crystal clear because this hasn't seen a barrel. This is unaged rum. It's also different because this rum is not made from molasses like the other 2 that we saw. This rum is actually made from the juice of the sugarcane directly. So you press the cane, you get the juice, and then you ferment and distill that, and that's how you get a rum agricole. Those 3 rums are going to have extremely different flavors to them. So any recipe that says silver rum, whatever you would use is going to not color your drink, but is going to add a different flavor profile to it. So just going silver rum doesn't really tell you much. The gold rum, generally you would think, oh, well, gold rum means it's got a little more flavor to it than your unaged or your clear rums, and maybe it's got a little more age and some wood on it. Maybe, but maybe not. It could be a rum that is very lightly aged and has a little bit of coloring put into it. But in general, when you see recipes that are calling for a gold rum, they are calling for something that's got a little more character than maybe one of your clear charcoal filtered rums. They're generally meaning to call for something that isn't just column stilled. But a gold rum could just be, something like this that's got a little bit of caramel coloring added to it, and then they can market it as gold rum because gold is not, it's not a distinction that has any meaning in the United States. And then dark rums can be anything. Dark rum could be something that has sat in a barrel for 20 years and has picked up all sorts of darkness and color to it, or it can be a brand new rum straight out of a vat that they've happened to add caramel coloring to make it really, really dark. A la things like Black Seal rum from Gosling's is really, really dark, but it's really, really dark and it's a really young rum. So again, that distinction really doesn't mean a whole lot to you. So when you see these classic recipes that are calling for those things, you have to be able to translate that into some understanding of what that means. Now, fortunately, people like Jeff Beachbum Berry, who go out and research these recipes from the history of tiki, are usually very careful to figure out what the flavor profile is of the rum and then match that to a particular type of rum. So rather than just say gold rum, they will say something like a lightly aged Jamaican rum, and that tells you something more about the kind of rum that you want to put with that. But so what does that mean? Why are you just saying Jamaican? Does that mean that all Jamaican distillers make their rum in the same way? Not at all, but Jamaica does have a certain tendency toward high ester pot still rums, and so that's kind of characteristic of them. So an ester is a organic chemical compound coming off the still, usually toward the tail end, that provides all of the aromatics. And so the high ester rums are the really, really kind of funky, heavily aromatic rums. The esters can come off at different time periods in the distilling process, blah, 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 sciencey. We don't want to play around too much with that. But high ester, so high ester means something that's got a lot of ester content, which means it's going to really impact you in the nose and going to have a large amount of funk to it. Now, when we say Jamaica, or we say Puerto Rico, or Venezuela, or Martinique, and rums from those different areas, one of the things that colors the rum production from those different areas is the colonial powers that be, and how they colonized, and which portions of the Caribbean they colonized. And so you will sometimes see reference to a classification system, which is sort of the colonial classification system. And the colonial classification system sort of breaks rum down into three major categories. The Spanish style, or Ron, so if you say Ronde something or other, that's usually translated as rum of whatever place it's from. So Ronde Guatemala would be rum of Guatemala. So Spanish style rums tend to be done with column stills, almost exclusively column stills. They tend toward a lighter character. Most of their character comes from is picked up from whatever aging process they go through. So they tend to be a little more wood-centric or oak-centric, or whatever wood you're putting them in and casking them in. In some ways, those rums can be a little more like some of your American whiskeys that get the predominance of their character from the wood that they are in. So predominantly column still, predominantly light rums, not necessarily light in color, but light in flavor. They're not going to overpower you with the flavor. Still has a distinctive style to it. These kinds of rums, the light distilled, column distilled rums that are lightly aged, are generally the backbone of a lot of different tiki drinks. So it's always good to have some of that on hand. And in fact, one of the things we're going to do right now is we're going to go to a classic, which everybody has had, almost assuredly. If you've drunk any rum in your life, you've probably had Bacardi Rum Superior. Now, this is a slightly different release of that rum. This is a collector's release, a limited edition heritage pack that I got talked into buying. And I think it is distilled slightly differently than their traditional Superior, and so has a slightly different flavor profile, but it just gets across the point pretty clearly that this is going to be a clean rum. It's column stilled. It's going to be low ester. It is going to be a nice workhorse, a nice backbone kind of rum. And so if we just take a swirl, there we go.
We have a David, and we have a Chris.
And, you know, here you go. Here it is in a glass. This thing is like crystal clear. This is the rum we're all used to. Not really pronounced on the nose. I mean, there's some. I tend to associate Bacardi with, this is going to sound nasty, but with almost a rubbing alcohol kind of scent to it. It's not overpowering like rubbing alcohol would be, but there is a sense of that.
It smells more like alcohol than like specifically rum.
Yes, right. Tastes a little hot, and it's only, what, it's 40%? It's got to be like 40%. Might be as much as 43. It should say on here. It doesn't say on the bottle because they're legally required to. Oh, it is a little hotter than their normal. Yeah, it's 44.5%. So 89 proof, which explains some of the heat there, which is...
Now, when I'm drinking rum and cokes, especially if I'm like at an event or a concert or a, you know, kind of generic restaurant, or
you're at some restaurant where you don't trust their cocktail making capability,
or you know, it's just a stand up, you know, like at a dance or something,
right? Somebody's wedding.
You know, Bacardi and Coke or Captain and Coke is what I drink. It is.
Yeah,
it adds that kind of flavor to the Coke, and
there certainly is there's kind of a vanilla note to it. It's like a really, really dilute vanilla extract. You almost get the vanilla at the very, very end. But yeah, I mean, it's I don't want to say it's the vodka of rums, but I mean, it kind of is, and it's going to provide you that that backbone of alcohol. It's not going to get in the way of too many of the flavors, and it will add just a hint of that vanilla note to your cocktails. All right. So that's a typical example of a Puerto Rican rum. It's all column still. It's classic Spanish style. Another Spanish style would be from Cuba, the actual Cuban Havana Club. And you'll note that this isn't a clear rum. This is still Spanish style. This has got some light aging on it and picks up some color from the barrel, and it has not been charcoal filtered. So slightly different rum. It's still in the Spanish style. It has a little more character than the Bacardi does, at least the Bacardi Superior. Bacardi is making some fine stuff now. Their 4-year, their 8-year, their 10-year, etc. are all really, really nice. The Ronde Barolito is also a Puerto Rican rum that my wife is going to hand me here. So again, color profile looks a little more like the Havana Club in terms of its color, maybe a little darker. Again, this is a Spanish style. It's 43% alcohol. Clear column still, almost all column still rum goes into this. This is lightly aged, lightly to moderately aged, 3 to 8 years probably. Rums go in here. The Ronde Barolito, though, has a lot more character than the Bacardi does, and you pay for it a little bit. I mean, this bottle of Bacardi will set you back $19, maybe something less than that. And when we picked this up, it was like 40, and now it's going for about 50 because people have found out about Ronde Barolito. It's very good rum. Mixes in with that Spanish style when you want just a little more flavor from your Spanish style rum.
So besides the Bacardi, what are common Puerto Rican rums that you could find it?
So, you want to throw me off here. Not a problem. I will get you that in. So column still, you're looking for column still. Canabrava is a, is it Panamanian? Panamanian, but still done in that same kind of style. Don Q. All of Don Q's line is primarily Puerto Rico. You can find that pretty much anywhere. The Ronde Barolito line. Something, obviously, Bacardi's higher end products like their 8 and their 10-year are still done in the Spanish style, but a lot more aging. All of these rums, if they're done in the Spanish style and they have a lot more flavor profile to them because of the aging. It's almost all going to be wood characteristics. So unlike some of the other rums from other areas around the world that have a lot of fruity notes to them, like rotted bananas and that sort of thing, or orange that you would associate maybe with the El Dorado or Plantation brands, your Spanish style rums are almost always going to have more wood characteristics to them. Oak, sherry, those kinds of notes to them. Second major colonial power in the area is, of course, Britain. And Britain colonized all over the place, and they tend to, at least in my mind, a fruitier style of rum, and they tend more toward the blending of different rums. So you get blends, especially for their Navy style rums, where they blend different rums from around the region to get certain flavor profiles from them. These are almost always mixes of column and pot still rums together. So they're not this overpowering, funky rum coming straight out of a pot still. They've got some column still in there to provide some backbone to that. A lot of the Barbados rums fall into this category where you've got that mix of the column and the pot still to them. For both the Spanish and the British style, primarily we are talking, well, almost exclusively we are talking molasses-based rums. It's the French that come in, and the French introduce squeezing directly from the sugar cane and fermenting that. And so all of those rums are generally spelled R-H-U-M. You'll also see them as rum agricole, and they have an extremely different flavor profile. So while the British have got this slightly sweet, slightly fruity, high estery kind of sense to a lot of their different rums, all of that is still coming from molasses. The rum agricoles are much more, they're much closer to the land. They're just got a grassy flavor to them. You can be much more specific about where they're from based upon their flavors, because the terroir of the rum actually comes through. Once you take your sugar cane and you produce sugar from it and you have molasses left over, you've taken most of the character of where that sugar cane came from out of the rum. And the French, because of a variety of different reasons, mostly having to do with the fact that the British were bastards and wouldn't actually let them sell their sugar, went ahead and stopped making sugar from their colonies and just went straight into making rum. And so we get the rum agricoles. So rum agricole. So here is a rum agricole, crystal clear rum agricole, unaged from Clement from Martinique. This is also a rum agricole. It is also from Martinique. It is also from Clement. Note, they're very different colors. This is what happens when you stick this in a barrel and age it for a while. You get some color off the barrel. There might be a little artificial coloring in here, maybe not. This is a pretty good rum, actually. The VSOP wouldn't surprise me if all of that color is straight from the barrel. Tends to take a little bit of the grassy notes out and smooth it out and round it out a bit. This makes a fine daiquiri, but it's a weird daiquiri in the sense of it's just not your usual daiquiri flavor profile. But if you were to just classify all your rums in terms of, well, are they British, are they Spanish, or are they French, you still miss out on things like, well, wait, the two Clements I just showed are very different rums. So how can I continue to classify and get further distinction? Well, most folks have gotten away from the sort of colonial classification system. And you've heard me talk a lot about pot still, column still, blended, that sort of thing. And most of your modern classification systems for rum use elements of those. So if we go over to Minimalist Tiki and Matt's breakdown, so he has in his first category lightly aged filtered rums. So these tend to be almost all of your silver rums. They tend to be on the lower proof end of things, so they're in that 40, maybe up to 45, maybe even 50, but doubtful that they'd hit the 50% mark. These can be either British or Spanish style rums, depending upon where they're from. You're really thinking about the color and the light aging of them, though. So in his book, the Havana Club would qualify. The Plantation 3-star would. Certainly the Bacardi would. The Wray and Nephew, while a Jamaican clear unaged rum would not, because it's an overproof and he's got a special category for that. We also have a Barbados clear rum here. This is a real Mccoy 3-year that would also fall into that same category for Matt's characterization. The second characterization or classification he has is moderately aged rums. So these are in that sweet spot of 3 to 8 years. They generally haven't had any filtering done to take color out. They may have had a little bit of spirit caramel added into them to make them just slightly darker. These would be the things you usually associate with or call gold rums or darker rums. Most of these are British or Spanish style. Well, they're all going to be British or Spanish style because the agricoles have a different classification system to them. This is also a bit of a catch-all category for Matt because he does tend to break out sub-classifications of Jamaican overproof and Demerara rums. So the Jamaican rums. His next classification is for dark Jamaican rums, which is nomenclature for any rum that is really high in ester count, has that funky note to it. It's usually characterized by a high amount of pot still rum as opposed to column stills, and the use of dunder or dunder pits in order to add flavor back into the rum. So what they're doing here is you throw the distillate in, you get the fermented liquid in to your still, and then you, of course, distill it, but there's always going to be some material left. And so you take that material and you throw it out back. That forms your little dunder pit. Well, what they do is when they take their fermenting juice, they'll add some of that dunder back into it. And so you get this continuous cycle and you get these higher and higher ester counts that come in. Or not necessarily counts, it's just you get different ester profiles for those. So Jamaican rums, of which the Wray and Nephew that I just showed is a Jamaican rum, but again, separate classification because it's an overproof. What have I got for Jamaicans? Well, I've got the sort of the classic Appleton. So Appleton, I hear tell Appleton is going to a different bottling scheme, which is kind of sad because I really like the fact that their bottles are very distinctively shaped, so you can tell that's an Appleton rum. Appleton is kind of the classic Jamaican rum. It's got a lot of funk. It's got a lot of fruit notes to it. That classic almost rotted banana or rotting banana olfactory note to it is almost ubiquitously present. I think who else? I tend to include a lot of the St. Lucian rums because they have a similar kind of funk to them. I'm not sure that Matt would put them in this category, but I kind of do. I think if it's got a really high ester count to it and has that fruit-forward funkiness, then it would go into Matt's category of aged Jamaican rum or dark Jamaican. Now, I've been schooled recently, and for a while when I was making cocktails, when it would call for a Jamaican rum, I would tend to reach for my Appleton signature bottle, which is the younger version of the one I was just showing you. This is the 12-year that we've got back here. And it's been pointed out, and I should have known this because I should have done a tasting of the two side by side, that the signature is blended to achieve a more even flavor profile and isn't quite as distinctively funky as something like the Appleton 12-year. So if you really want the funk from an aged Jamaican rum, something like the Appleton 12-year would be a good call for you there. So stuff that's going to hit you in the nose, has that fruit forward. There's almost dried fruit flavors in this. This is yummy stuff. That would be what's in that categorization. It's almost always going to be primarily pot still. Next category is the unaged Jamaican overproof, and the classic here is the Ray and Nephew white overproof.
Hamilton, great Jamaican rum, very tasty.
So the Ray and Nephew is what is it, 63%? Yeah, 63% alcohol by volume. So that's 126 proof. So this is some hot stuff. You'll see this used a lot for drinks that have a lot of different heavy fruit flavors or heavy spice flavors in them, because you really want a rum that's got a strong backbone and strong flavor, and you'll get the characteristics of that rum through. This, despite being from Jamaica, has a very, very different flavor profile than the Appleton 12. And it's not just because it's a younger, hotter rum. It's much more vegetal to my nose. Come back. So if this is rotting bananas, this is that sharp, almost underripe bananas. If you've ever had that distinct flavor of biting into an underripe banana or biting into the rind of a banana, yeah, that's what comes through here for me. Hamilton also makes an overproof Jamaican rum that is quite good, quite good. Aged Demerara is his next category. So Demerara rums are almost always coming from Guyana, and this would be your classic line is the El Dorado. Now anything that is produced out of Guyana is produced by the same distillery. There's only one in Guyana, no matter what the labeling says. So there you go. Demerara rums tend to be even more fruit forward, a little more sweet. Kind of characteristics more of, it's not like the molasses comes through more, but they just tend to be sweeter, more earthy. There's an earthier sweetness to them. It's hard to explain how it differs, but it is not the nose bomb that the Jamaicans are. But flavor-wise, it is certainly got as much or more. They do tend to be on the sweeter side. So you have to be careful when you're working with Demerara rums not to include too much other sweet components to your... so you might back off sometimes on the amount of sweetness that's in the cocktails because the Demeraras can be so sweet. Much lighter mouthfeel. This is an 8-year as opposed to the 12-year Appleton. Wood notes come through on this a little more than they do on the Appleton, which is interesting given that it's got 4 less years in oak. Still good wine, still good rum, very different flavor profile. Again, this is almost all olfactory and rotted fruit, and this is much more that sweetness, and I get a lot of the brown sugar kind of comes through. It's not really molassesy, but it's the turbinado, brown sugar, that raw sugary kind of flavor to it. It's not necessarily overly sweet by any means, but it just does come across as a sweeter kind of rum. Overproof Demeraras, they make them, and these tend to be rums that are called for by name in tiki cocktails, and the absolute classic, the unheralded master of the overproof Demerara is Lemon Heart and Son, and they're 151. This thing is a monster. It's 151 proof. That's 75.5% alcohol. This is a beast, but the flavor that this thing has is amazing, and this is there are just so many cocktails that call for Lemon Heart in particular. Now you can substitute other 151s. Don't substitute Bacardi's 151 because A, they're not making it anymore, and B, it just is. It's not, doesn't have the same flavor profile as the Demerara. The Hamilton 151, on the other hand, while not exactly the same flavor profile as the Lemon Heart, they stopped making the Lemon Heart 151 for a while, and Hamilton kind of stepped into that market and took over the 151 Demerara market. These things, you'll see them in tiki drinks that have a lot of other components to them, where you really want the rum to stand up and stand out. But you will also see it sometimes in swizzles, where there's going to be a lot of crushed ice. They're mixed by hand, and they're generally simple drinks, but there's a lot of dilution in them. And so you want to use something that's got a higher proof to it, because if you use a lower proof rum and you dilute it, then it just tastes like watered down rum. But if you use a high octane rum and dilute it down, then you're better off. You still get all the flavor, and it doesn't taste diluted to you. So there we have the lightly aged filtered rums, one, moderately aged rum, which is pretty much anything that's in that 3 to 8 year range, aged Jamaican rum, unaged Jamaican overproof rum, aged Demerara rum, overproof Demerara rum, and then rum agricoles, and it loops all of the rum agricoles sort of into one category. Most of your tiki cocktails, however, are going to call, if they call for a rum agricole, they're going to call for something that's got some age on it. So you're going to be looking at things like the Clement VSOP as opposed to the Clement Blanc, almost always. And Matt's signing off advice for his classification system is that the things you really, really, really need, you need a good, lightly aged filtered rum. And the color here actually matters depending on the kind of cocktails you're doing. When you're doing presentation, you want the color of the other ingredients to really pop. You don't want a dark, murky rum messing with that. So you need a good bottle or two of a lightly aged, usually Spanish style, clean rum. Second, you need an aged Jamaican rum. And, you know, I just, you can't go too wrong with the Appleton Estate brands. And third, you need an aged Demerara rum. And while you could use Eldorado is perfectly fine. You could also use, for something that's a little slightly different, you can use the British Navy's Pusser's rum. That's primarily a Demerara rum. It calls back to a tradition of the British Navy's blending, and this was the recipe that they used for the tot that was given to the British sailors. And so is a fine choice as well. It's coming from the same distillery as the Eldorado, but it's using different stills. There's some ancient wooden coffee stills that are being used to still produce portions of the Pusser's rum, which give it a very different flavor than the other Demeraras. That's it. That's 3 bottles, maybe 4 if you want to have 2 of the Spanish style lightly aged rum. And that's what he says, if you're going to start on this journey, you only got room on your bar for 3 bottles, that's what you do. Go with those. And then whatever your price point is, just work your price point. I mean, if you want an aged Jamaican rum, but the Appleton Estate 12 year is just a little too expensive for what you want to do, sure, fine. Go ahead and use the Appleton Reserve. It's not gonna break the bank. Still get a little bit of that Jamaican funk in there. It'll all be good. You don't need the monster flavor bombs like the 151s, the Ray and Nephew, and that sort of thing to start off with. They can be a little bit more of an acquired taste.
So I'm going to interrupt here because Dave specifically asked for some midpoint rums that, if you're going to buy 3 to 5 bottles, what would you buy? So I have made Pooch a list looking at 2 different places that are the kind of $20 to $30 range.
Okay.
So I thought you could pick out from this type of list if you were going to get 3 bottles or if you were going to get 5 bottles, what would you get?
Okay. All right. So let's see. 3 bottles. We've got a Clement aged. We've got Eldorado 8, the Florida Cana 7, 7 year. Okay. The Hamilton New York blend.
And the Jamaican.
And their Jamaican blend. Okay. The Ray and Nephew, the Overproof, right?
Mm-hmm.
Plantation 3-star. Yes, yes, yes. Go with the Plantation 3-star. That would be my call for the lightly aged white, quote unquote, white rum. Plantation 3-star is flavorful. It's in the $19 to $20 range almost universally. It's easy to get. Plantation's a big distributor or a big distiller, so you can get it, find it. That would be my choice, I think, for the light rum. So Jamaican, what are we going to do for the Jamaican? The Hamilton Jamaican is hard to get away from. It's really quite good. The Appleton Signature is in the $20 ballpark. It'll get you some of that Jamaican funk. Now that I've had the Signature and the 12-year side by side, you really get much more of the funk off the 12, and so I would be. I'd want to see what the pricing was on the 12 before recommending people rush out and get it. Although, as a general rule, as opposed to gins, as opposed to American whiskeys, particularly bourbon, rum is still cheap. For the same quality of bottling that you would get from a really good rum like the Plantation 3-star, it's going to set you back $20. It would set you back for an equivalent gin probably 30 or 40.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not expecting the Appleton 12-year to be tremendously more expensive than the Appleton Signature. It'll be more, but it'll probably be maybe in the $30 range, and so that's quite good. The Real Mccoy, I have the Real Mccoy 3 here, and I really like Real Mccoy as a distiller. They're out of the Foursquare Distillery in Barbados. They do really, really good stuff. This is probably in the upper $20 range as well.
The 5-year is 29.
Right, the 5-year's got some color and funk to it. It's coming off of a blend of pot and column still, so again, it's going to give you a slightly different flavor profile. If you just want a clean, clear rum that's not going to be adding a lot of sort of odd flavors. I mean, if you really want that Spanish style, go ahead and go for like Don Q or Bacardi, because
Bacardi Havana Club.
Because they're that simple, straightforward, and they're cheap. You easy get them, and they're cheap. The things that I've been recommending, like the Real Mccoy and the Plantation 3-star, are things that I would sip out of a glass because that's me. But they do add a little more complexity to the cocktails and to your drinks than what you would get off of, say, just the Bacardi or the Don Q. So that's what I would go with for my Jamaican style. What would I do? I would do the Appleton 12 if it's not too expensive. I'd have to check out what the Hamilton is. It's probably in the $20 to $25 range.
The Hamilton's on like 23, 25.
Right. So I mean, Hamilton's one that you can find pretty easily from any place that has a wide selection of rums. And by wide selection of rums, I do not mean that they have racks and racks and racks of different flavors of Captain Morgan and Bacardi. That's not what we mean by having a good selection of rums. We mean different distillers from different parts of the Caribbean, or different parts of the world. One of the nice things is sugarcane, while it's temperamental, you can produce sugar from sugarcane almost anywhere in the world, and as long as you're producing molasses, you can produce rum. So there are distilleries all over the place.
The Appleton 12 Estate Rare Blend 12-year is $40.
Okay, so I was a little off. The Appleton 12-year is $40, but again, $40 for a really good bottle, as opposed to $75, $80 bucks for it. All right, and for the Demerara rum. Yeah, the two that I showed you, the Eldorado 8 or the Pussers, yeah, either of those is going to be a fine fine choice for you, and neither one's going to set you back too badly. I don't have the numbers here, but I'm sure Star will get them for me. Matt is writing for mostly tiki novices, right? This is minimalist tiki. Here's the 30 tiki cannon drinks. In order to make these, here's a short list of rums that you need in order to make those cocktails. Martin Kate is actually proposing a classification system here in this book, Smugglers Cove. And he has a variety of different categories, and he's laying this out primarily by production method, right? So you're not going to see necessarily the same distinctions of, oh, I want Jamaican rums in this classification and Demerara rums in this other classification. His classifications break down based on the distilling process. So pot still, column still, blends of pot and column still, and then rum agricoles. What? My wife is coming over. She's going to.
I'm getting Matt's book. I'm going to post it.
Again, right. So, and within those classifications, he further breaks it out by, aging process. So you have pot still unaged rums. Hamilton makes a great one. What else has he got here? The Ray and Nephew Overproof from Jamaica would be in this category. It's pot still rum, has some funk to it. St. Lucian rums would fall into this same category. And the pot still is broken out. Pot still unaged, pot still lightly aged, pot still aged, and pot still long aged. Now, pot still long aged, I don't actually own any of because I can't afford any of these things. I mean, we're talking Appleton Estate 50 year. Yeah, I'm not, nobody here on this channel is going to be buying that anytime soon. But on the aged realm, we've got some Cadenhead in here, the Hamilton St. Lucia. I've got a couple of bottles of that. Samaroli, I've got. So, there's some things in that realm that are quite good. Now, these do tend to be rums that require a little getting used to because of the funkiness coming from the pot still. But there is no mistaking a pot still rum, a pure pot still rum, from a pure column still rum. They are night and day. They're still rums, but they're very, very different flavor profiles. So the next classification that Martin uses would be the column still. And again, he breaks it down similarly. So column still lightly aged, and here we have the Don Q Crystal, the Ronde Barolito 2-star as opposed to the 3-star, Cruzan, Canabrava, those sorts of rums. Column still lightly aged. So these are going to be your Canabrava 7-year, the Don Pancho from Panama, English Harbor 5 and 10 year. Those are easy to get. Let's see what else. The Florida Cana 12-year falls in here. Almost all of Kirk and Sweeney's lines, the 12, 18, and 23, all fall in here. Now, the Kirk and Sweeney is coming from the Dominican Republic. Florida Cana is coming from Nicaragua. English Harbor is coming from Antigua. So all of these different geographic locations, which are going to do distilling slightly differently from one another. So you're still not getting a consistency of flavor in this categorization, but they are still all based on column still. This is pure column still rums. Long aged, you get things like the English Harbor 25-year, which a couple years ago for National Tiki Day, or National Rum Day, I actually got a taste of the English Harbor 25. It is quite good, quite amazing. I'm not going to own a bottle of it though. It's going to be outside of my price range for the most part. Florida Cana's upper age range, the 18 and 25, would fall into this category. Trying to think of other things that people will have seen. The Zacapa. Zacapas are all column still, so the Zacapa 23 and the Zacapa XO, both of those are from Guatemala, and those would fall into the same category of column still with some aging on it. Okay, so then that takes us, if you got pot stills and you got column stills, and then the next category would be pot and column stills blended. And there's a whole bunch of rums that fall into this category, including pretty much anything out of Foursquare. Um, Almost all of your Demerara rums fall into the same category as well. So here, I mean, this category, again, we break it down aged, lightly aged, aged, long aged, yeah, and just depending on how much time they're spending in the barrel, how much time since the original distillation are you getting that bottle. Appleton Estates Reserve Blend, their 12-year blend, both fall into the blended aged category. The Signature, Appleton Signature, which is what I have over there, the lower price point, is a blended light aged rum, but again from Jamaica. Other things that you can find, Diplomatico, their Añejo and their Blanco. I've got some of their Blanco up there. The Mount Gay Eclipse, the Plantation 3 stars, a lightly aged. The Real McCoy 3 stars, a lightly aged blended. St. Teresa's rums are all combination of pot and column still. And so what you've got here is a sort of a perfect marriage of the wood aspects that you're going to get off the column still, because those rums will pick up a lot of that woody characteristic to them. But you also get some of the funk off of the pot still, but you're not going to have that funk overpower the rum completely. And here we're usually talking about taking rums that have been distilled in two different processes and usually aged separately and then blended together. Although you can do it the other way around. You can marry the two and then put them in a barrel and age them. And those will give you very, very different flavor characteristics. And unfortunately, it's really, really hard to tell because most of your rum producers are not, they're just not up on giving the consumer all of the details about how the rum is produced, which is why if you're actually going to drop some serious change on a bottle of rum, I would recommend that you pay attention to the label of the bottle, and the more information that that distiller gives you about that bottle and what is in that bottle, the better. Just that way you know what you're getting. So this is part of the reason why I love Foursquare rums, is because Foursquare rums, you can read the label and they will tell you what they've done with that rum in order to get that particular characteristic. So what do we have here?
Let's grab the first one.
First one is one of their latest is their latest release, is the Foursquare Exceptional Cask Selection, mark number 12. This is the Nobiliary. So this is a pot and column blend. This was aged 14 years in ex-bourbon casks. So this is 62% alcohol by volume, 124 proof. So there you have it, right? So they're telling you how long it's been aged. They're telling you it's coming out of both pot and column stills. They're telling you what the cask was. So they're not just saying it was cast and aged. So you get ex-bourbon and non-chill filtered, fully matured at Barbados. No sweeteners, no other flavors, no other color has been added. 14 years, ex-bourbon barrels. That's the color you get for aging 14 years in ex-bourbon barrels. Yeah, so there you go. Fine Barbados rum there. Cool.
Okay.
Distilled.
Of course, we pretty much buy
They're exceptional casks whenever they come out.
exceptional casks when they come out.
Right. What did I pour? What was the clear? Oh, this is the Bacardi. Yeah,
No, I cleaned the Bacardis.
okay.
Is that your real McCoy?
Oh, it probably is. I have no idea. I'm just talking here and not paying attention to what I have in my glasses. No, I don't think so, but nope. That's very different. Wow. Okay, so again, within, you got pot still, column still, blended. Within each one of those, you've got aging categories. And then if you, here's the problem with Martin's classification system, is because it includes, say, all of the rums that are pot stilled, but from different distilleries around the region or from different regions. You're going to get some different sugarcane varieties. You're going to get different fermentation techniques, different yeasts being used. Different types of pot stills are going to produce different types of rum. So even within the single category of something like aged pot still rums, there's still going to be significant variation on what you're getting. But at the very least, based on the distillation process, you know you're going to get some big olfactory notes hitting you just because it's pot still rum. It's going to be funkier, right? So pot still, column still, blends are sort of the best of both worlds. Then we get into some other categories. So you get a black blended black. Okay, so here's the deal. If you're drinking a rum that bills itself as black, I would nearly guarantee that unless you are paying through the nose for this rum, that you are drinking something that has had a spirit caramel addition to it. Were you going with those?
I was going to drink them.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I'm going to drink one. And
that was the one on the left.
Right. Yeah, so this is the Appleton. Okay.
And this is
the Demerara, the Eldorado 8. Yep. Okay. So tasty stuff. Black blended, Gosling's, Black Seal, the Hamilton Guyana rum. So that's a Demerara rum, but it's been colored, so it's black. Koloa Bay, and let's see, what else? Lemon Heart does make a non 151. They make a Lemon Heart 80 that would fall into that same category. I haven't had it. I presume that's going to have some of the same flavor profiles of the Lemon Heart, just not as aggressive. There are reasons why you want that extra coloring. Sometimes tiki can be all about presentation and you need that color component, which is why there's still, we don't entirely divorce ourselves from this notion of a clear or a silver rum and black rums and just concentrate entirely on the distillation process, because your drink will look different if you make it with a black rum versus a crystal clear silver rum. And sometimes that coloration is important to the presentation. You know, we drink with our eyes first, we drink with our nose second, we drink with our taste buds third. And hopefully you never get to the point of tasting with touch, because it probably means you've just fallen over into your cocktail, and it's bad. Don't do that. Drink responsibly. So black blended, Gosling's Black Seal, Caruba's Black, Hamilton Guyana 86, the Lemon Heart 80. One you can get almost anywhere, the Pampero Anniversario. Comes in a short, squat bottle, often has like a leather pouch around it. My leather pouches have gone off to other things like holding swizzle sticks and dice and that sort of thing. So this is actually what I tend to use for my black rum. You can tell it's pretty darn black. Yep, Pampero Anniversario. It's not as black as your Goslings, even though this is aged longer than the Goslings, which should tell you something about the amount of coloration that's added to the Goslings. So anyway, Pampero Anniversario. Yummy stuff. There. Black blended overproofs, which I gotta say, you know, it's a fine category to have, but I don't run into them. I don't see much of a call for them. I'm sure they're perfectly fine rums, although the exception again is the Lemon Heart 151. So I guess all of those cocktails that call for the Lemon Heart 151 or the Hamilton 151 would fall into this category, the black blended overproof, right? Okay. Those would be the two exceptions. And then we start to get into strangeness. So there's Martin has this last major category, which is then subdivided. The last major category are the fresh cane rums, the what we'd usually associate with the French style, the RHUMs. Um, so rum Barbancourt, rum Barbancourt. I have a bottle up there somewhere. It's like next to the plantations, Jamaica, on the left-hand side. I think that's where it is. How good am I? Woohoo! I know my rum collection. So this is Barbancourt 8-year, and they're using a combination. If I remember right, they're using a combination of sugarcane pressing and molasses. So somewhat different production. So they're kind of off on their own in terms of how they produce. So, but they're generally more classified as a more French style. And then you have the various agings of the rum agricoles. And again, there's the Clement Crystal, or excuse me, Blanc, not Crystal, that is unaged. The VSOP, which is slightly aged. DePaz and Rum JM are both also Martinique brands, and they run the gamut from unaged through fairly lengthy aging. I will say that your rum agricoles will tend to run you a little more. Because of the different flavor profile, they tend to not be what someone is expecting when they order a rum. And as a consequence, they just don't, they're not just an acquired taste, but if you walk in the door thinking, oh, I want a Demerara rum, oh, I want a nice Bacardi, and you get a rum agricole, it's going to taste strange to you. It's going to taste different. You're like, is this really rum? And so it's a bit of a niche market, and so the prices tend to be a little higher for the rum agricoles. I really like the Clement line, and I would say if you're looking for adding a rum agricole to your collection, you can't really go wrong with the Clements. Like I said, most of your tiki drinks are going to require an aged rum agricole to take some of that grassiness out. And as a consequence, you're going to pay a little more, but like the VS or the VSOP are probably where you want to be for that. So that's the general classifications. So you're going to focus in primarily on how it was made, length of time that it has been aged, if that is known to you. Read your labels so you know what you're getting, and just because there's a number on it doesn't mean that it's actually been aged that long. And then knowing something about the region where it was produced will probably tell you something else about it. So again, you could have a rum that is a column still, and a column still from Bacardi out of Puerto Rico is going to taste somewhat different from the column still produced in Trinidad for the Angostura 1919. I think the Angostura 1919 generally has a little more complexity to it. Although the Bacardi 8 and 10 are getting up there and have that same level of complexity. I was discussing this with a friend the other day, that the Bacardis all seem to have a little bit of that, not just the isopropyl alcohol kind of nose to them, but there can also be kind of a gasoline or a petrol feel or smell to them. It's not really off-putting. It's just, oh, that's a flavor note in them that you don't find in, say, something like the Angostura 1919. You'll find other flavors there. So even within a categorization of, okay, it's within 3 to 5 years of aging, it's all column still, and still those rums are different because they're from different regions. So this is both one of the great nice things about rum, is because there is such a huge variety in the flavors of different rums that it's great exploring and seeing what's there. But it does make it a little harder when you're putting together rum cocktails, because when your rum cocktail that you see online says 3 ounces of gold rum, you're left sort of shaking your head going, well, I don't know. Should I use the last dregs of my rum Barbancourt 8-year? It's kind of gold. Or should I use the Clement VSOP? That's kind of gold. Oh, but wait, my Havana Club is gold. Which one of those should I do?
Very different drinks.
And these are, as Star says, those are hugely different drinks from one another. So it pays you to have some familiarity with rums, which I'm going to put in my plug now. I got 2 plugs here. First plug is, once we're done with this whole COVID madness, if you're local or if you like to travel, come to my place and I'll walk you through some rum tastings, because I have a fairly large collection and I like sharing my rums with people. So come by and we'll see what we can do. So that's plug number 1. Plug number 2 is get to know the liquor stores that know their rums and can talk to you about rums and can get you the rums that you want. When you walk in, periodically, and there's new rums on the line that you haven't seen before, but they're from known distillers, you know that rum purveyor is going out and finding new and interesting things to stock their shelves with. So, shout outs to guys, for those of you that are local, guys like S&R Liquors and Ace Liquors in the district, Schneider's to a little lesser extent, although, that's where I got one of my bottles of Havana Club. Cuban Havana Club was from them. While it was legal at that point to sell that. That's when I got it in that brief window. Oh, right. So obviously I'm on the East Coast, DC, and I'm talking about DC liquor stores. If you are out on the West Coast, really what I'm familiar with is the San Francisco area and K&L. K&L Distributors is amazing. Periodically I get emails from them and they say, hey, come look at our rum collection. And I sit there and drool because, of course, they can't ship to Virginia where I live. And so, yeah, it's actually probably better for my pocketbook and for the amount of space that we have here. Yeah, K&L has an amazing collection of rums. And if you go through the doors and actually talk with their personnel there, they're amazingly knowledgeable and can help you very much. So those are my 2 big plugs. 1, come here, I will treat you to rums. 2, go to the liquor stores that maintain high quality multitude of rum selections. And if they're spending any more than 2 rows of alcohol on rum flavored with dragonberry and rum flavored with mint and rum flavored with God, I don't know what that is. That's not what I mean. You know what I mean? We want different distillers from all around the world, and you want to see different bottles showing up on their shelves periodically to know that they're still out there actively searching to find cool and interesting things. If you happen to luck in to a relationship with one of those guys that is knowledgeable enough to like commission caskings of their own, like the guys at S&R Liquors, they had a commissioned casking for a St. Lucian rum that is absolutely fantastic. And I'm very, very happy that I have one of those bottles, one of the few bottles from that cask. Further north of us, Viscount Liquor in Poughkeepsie, New York, also has an amazingly good staff for knowing their alcohols. The first time I walked through the doors at Viscount, I was blown away by their selection. Now I recognize that their selection is, while it is still wide and varied, is probably more targeted at less the rum aficionado and more the entry level. So all of the rum, if you want a rum from a particular area, they can probably get it for you, but they're probably not going to get you like 4 or 5 different rums from Guyana, let's say. They'll probably have 1 or 2 on the shelves. My last trip to Kansas City, was it Binny's? Gomer's. right. Gomer's generally stocks a pretty decent rum selection, and they do generally have the Foursquare exceptional casks on hand. Whatever the most recent release is, they will generally have. There is. Hmm. So hopefully this has been somewhat enlightening and somewhat interesting. Um, I would really love to take you on like just a tour through of different rums from different places around the world and different blends of them. But that would require me to actually put a little more effort into a week's podcast than what I did for this one. So you get what you get. Hopefully this was enjoyable. It's National Rum Day after all, so medications aside, I'm going to be having a little bit of rum this evening and probably finishing up with one of the four squares.